Hello friends, welcome to UGC EPG Pathshala. I am Taruna Bansal, Assistant Professor, Department of Geography, Jamia Millia Islamia. Today I will be speaking on theories of urban morphology. Before I start, I would like to tell you what I mean by urban morphology. Now when we speak of urban morphology, in simple words, urban morphology is nothing but the internal structure of the city. Over the period of time, number of urban geographers or sociologists have spoken on different models or different morphologies of urban cities. Now, this is important today because today around more than 50% of the 50% of the population in world is staying in urban cities. So, when people are living in cities, it is not that city is just growing by itself. City is also growing because people are migrating to city from different parts, be it rural or nearby cities or nearby small towns. So, the morphology or the internal structure of the city is not only dependent on the historical development, but also on the day-to-day process which the city undergoes. Now, when we speak of urban morphology, we first speak of the models which were or theories which were provided by pioneer urban geographers in the 1940s. Rather, we start with Burgers who gave the model in 1926. So, here I will discuss three basic models or theories of urban morphology. I will start with Burgers' concentric zone theory, then I have Homer Hoyt's sector model, and then we discuss Harrison-Ullman's multiple nuclei theory. Now, when we discuss each one of these, we see what were the basis of each one of these models, what is the applicability of these models today, and are they actually universal in nature. So, through this we in a sense try to analyze, is the city throughout the world going through the same process? Naturally, the answer will be no. But can we actually come up with a general pattern or not? So, I start my topic or my lecture with the introduction saying that urban geographers have made important contributions in the field of spatial transformations that have been witnessed by urban landscapes in the material and symbolic aspects during the 20th and 21st centuries. Some of the landmark attempts in these directions were in the direction of the analysis of urban morphology, as I have already said, which was done by Burgers, Hoyt, Harrison, Ullman. Although cities at present have changed significantly since the models were developed, yet they are frequently cited in debates of urban morphology, even to dismiss their relevance in the present world. That is true to say to a large extent because the city possesses a distinctive combination of various types of land use, but a common pattern sometimes can be traced. The models provided by these scholars, namely Burgers, Hoyt, Harrison, Ullman, today are part of the philosophy of urban geography, and one needs to discuss them in order to understand the basic foundations of this field. The morphological pattern of the city has been discussed by three theoretical explanations. These are the concentric zone model, the sector model, and the multiple nuclei model. I start with the concentric zone model, which was given by Burgers, rather E.W. Burgers in 1923, based on his extensive and detailed case study of Chicago and its various neighborhoods. That means basically his model is based on how Chicago looked like or what was the land use of Chicago in 1920s. So, his model is basically the case study of Chicago, which he tried to generalize to find out, does city represent what Chicago was in 1920s. His model is radiating out from the Central Business District or CBD and represents increasing degree of cultural assimilation with greater economic and social status through each successive residential zones. In the words of Duncan in 1996, the zonal model became a significant and long-standing representation of the North American city, especially to the study of the correlation of social and spatial distance among the various classes of the society. Before understanding the Burgers' model of concentric zones, one has to study the tendency of the city to expand. In the words of Park, 1925, the typical processes of expansion of the city can be best demonstrated by a series of numbered concentric circles, as I have shown in my figure. Which is in the text. In the figure, it shows that zone 1 is the loop, which represents the central business district. Encircling this is the area in transition, which is usually surrounded by business and light manufacture. Then we have the zone 2, zone 3, the inhabited one, which is inhabited by workers who are working in the industries, and basically it is inhabited by the workers who left this zone of transition and have moved to the zone 3, because they always have the desire to live within easy access of their work. Then next is the residential zone 4, and it mainly consists of high class apartment buildings or a district of single family dwellings. The last one is the zone 5, which is usually beyond the city limit, and the commuter zone, and it consists of satellite cities or suburban areas within 30 to 60 minutes ride from the CBD. An inner zone has a tendency to extend to the area by the invasion of the next outer zone. This basically deals with the physical growth of the city and with the extension of the technical services that makes the city life livable, comfortable and luxurious. Burgers, through the model, presented the image of the progressive movement of residents of the inner city who had the tendency to move outwards to the zone of better environmental conditions. According to him, the American city should take form of 5 zones. These are Zone 1, the Central Business District or CBD, which represents the area which revolves around the social, commercial and civic line. It is also the hub of transportation, while Berger explains the 2 parts, the downtown retail district and the wholesale business district encircling the downtown. Zone 2, according to Burgers, is zone in transition. It is an area at which surrounding the CBD. It is zone of residential deterioration of old private houses consisting of largely subdivided dwelling units. This transition area is settled by immigrants and overrun by vices. It is full of rotten business and light manufacturing units from zone 1 who have encroached upon the residential belts. Some portion of this zone is likely to be found in the city's slums or poverty areas and crimes. In other words, this is zone which is mixture of regions of poverty, disease and other criminal activities and is therefore called zone of vice. Third is the zone of working men's homes. It is the ring sum up with the houses of working people's homes. This is predominantly inhabited by factory and shop workers who are skilled and thrifty. In other words, it is the zone of old residential blocks occupied by social groups of working class groups and families. Those are stable in their jobs. People of this zone move out of zone 2 to live nearer to their workplace. This is an area of second immigrant settlement, generally of the second generation. It is the region of escape from the slum or overcrowded places. Now we come to zone 4 with which is further from the CBD and is settled by spacious dwellers. In Chicago, this was dominated by native born Americans or middle income groups. The population residing in this zone are likely to be small proprietors, businessmen, salesmen, professionals and different official clerks. Now we come to the last zone, the 5th zone, which is farthest away from the city center, almost an hour's or 2 hours travelling time from center. This zone may be an open country of the countryside. People of this region seem to commute on a daily basis for their livelihoods to the center. Now, what are the criticisms? Now, criticism, when we say, Berger's theory has been very popular and has been widely used by his current authors, but the theory was criticized on several grounds. The first one being that local topographical features which affect the residential areas, their location was not taken into consideration. Now, this type of criticism looks invalid because he himself criticized that point, that is, zone distortions may result from variations in relief features. So, he already says this. But one of the major critiques of Burgers is Davis, who says that the theory can be criticized because the size of CBD is always irregular. in the pattern, and it is often rectangular than circular. That means, if we talk of concentric zones, circular zones would not make or would not develop when we talk of CBD. It would rather be rectangular. This is said by Davis, who criticized this Burgess model vehemently. Now, second criticism is that commerce and business areas of usually they extend from streets. That means, rather than going in radial way, they has to be linear, because lines of transportation near water or rail network are more important, because most of the industries will lie along the transportation lines. So, again to have concentric zones as cities development or physical growth becomes bit impossible. Another criticism is that near to industrial and transportation area in every zone, along the lines of transportation near water or rail network, industrial units lie. Now, when we talk of industrial units, we come to the fourth criticism of Davy. He says that each of these areas where we have zone of transportation, lines of transportation, as well as we have industrial units, we have people or other houses of low grade. Now, why does this occur? Here I would like to quote one of my professors who usually said, you often said that poor person cannot afford the luxury of transportation. Now, why do I say this? I quote one of my professors who often said that poor cannot afford the luxury of transportation. Now, why is that? Simply because a poor person will not travel daily to his working place. So, naturally, if we have industrial units, their low grade houses will come. So, it is nothing like that we will have low grade houses somewhere away from the industrial units. And if we see the history of urbanization, be it Indian urbanization or an urbanization in developing countries, be it urbanization in developed countries, you will always see that poor people or the working class workers of the industries always stayed near the industrial units. And last one point where Davy criticizes Burger's theory is that it lacks universal acceptance. Now, the critiques of Burger's concentric zone theory focus on that the theory is not applicable in the case of its treatment of wholesaling market. Similarly, in the modern city, the large and heavy industries do not take the form of concentric belt just outside the CBD. Instead, it forms wedges-like areas along transportation lines. The theory of Burger seems weak in the historical perspective too. The houses, streets, railroads and cultural areas developed during historical phases very hard. They don't change their location as such. The theory was generally considered in time and space, and it is outdated and limited only to large western industrial cities of the late 20th century. Therefore, this particular concentric zone scheme of the pre-industrial cities has neglected the present city. Now, if we talk in the words of Joburg, he says that the elite gather at the center and to the nearness of the governmental and religious buildings, while religion and politics in feudal cities had far more importance than the economic, in which the center's main market being subsidiary to religious and political structures. Now, before I go to the merits of the theory, I would like to explain one thing which I have done in the figure. Why did Burgess was just concentrating on the concentric zone theories. Now, here two points have to be mentioned. One, as I said, that he was influenced that cities growth is outwards in concentric zones. Second is that he took Chicago as his case study. Now, if you see the figure, you will see that the zones which Burgess has demarcated are actually the result of the land use which Chicago experienced in 1920s. And that is why the diagram which I have shown shows the land use of Chicago in 1920 as well as the zones given by Burgess for his model. Now, what are the merits of this? The chief supporter of Burgess' theory is Quinn, who in 1950 says a common sense observations tend to the theory confirmation. That means he says because Burgess has used his common sense, this is the proper way of providing that the theory has or can be acceptable or can be used, can have universal acceptance. Other thing which he says is that the probability of the concentric structure around the dominant retail area in various cities indicates by the urban gradients. Researchers also, the symmetry of concentric may be violated by local irregularities, and the most cities but conform largely to the Burgers patterns, as according to Quinn. Whatever the case may be, Haggett and Charlie say that Burgers model should be appreciated because it was a normative model based on simple structure of reality representing supposedly significant features of relationship in a generalized form. Therefore, to conclude the illustration of Burgers' model of concentric zone theory, it is an expansion of the city in its comprehensible manner by a series of concentric zones. Now, we come to the second model, which is called the sector theory. Now, sector theory was given by Homer Hoyt. Homer Hoyt observed that the city's structure has changed, and therefore, he propounded the sectorial theory in 1939. He emphasizes on the ribbons of development that extended along commercial streets leading out of the central business district and the tendency of industrial establishments to concentrate along railroad lines and rivers, the point on which Davy actually criticizes the Burgers model. He further notes the existence of poor and middle income housing along the rich residential areas in the peripheries of the cities. He opined that the internal structure of the city, rather the American city, was more axial than concentric, resulting in the formation of different sectors. In other words, the city grows, activities expand outward in a wedge or an axis or a sector from the center, as I have shown in my figure 3. His theory explains only the residential land use pattern. The other types of land use patterns are considered because of their influence upon the residential areas of the city. The city's areas which are on rent tend to more or less rather than being sectors than concentric zones, again as I have shown in figure 4. The areas located in one or more sectors of the city tend to be of the highest rent area, but it is not necessary that all areas are rent areas. The migration of outward sector is clearly visible in high quality residential areas where the older settlement remains behind to become medium quality residential areas. Hoyt stated that the sector theory is of fundamental importance in analyzing neighborhood, especially in the American city, for locating markets for retail sales. The high rent neighborhood of a city do not skip about at random in the process of movement. They follow a definite path in one or more sectors of the city. No city conforms to the ideal pattern, but the general figure is useful as in the American cities. The different types of residential areas tend to grow outward along rather distinct radii, and the new growth on the arc of a given sector tends to take on the character of the initial growth of that particular sector, as shown in figure 4. The basis of Hoyt's theory is a bundle of empirical work. The 64 American cities were the sample size of Hoyt's theory, which is collected by the Works Progress Administration. The survey of New York, Detroit, Chicago, Washington and Philadelphia supplemented the small and medium sized cities. Thus, to empirical generalizations, it is a very bulk part of observation. Nevertheless, the theory has not gone unchallenged. Now, the criticisms. The theory of Walter Ferry carried out a land use study of central Boston, in which he explored the urban land use shaping by the role of social factors. He pointed out various aspects of sector theory. On this basis of his survey, he argues that there is less validity of comparing the internal structure of number of cities when physical features like relief, location on a waterfront and other factors affect the pattern of some cities. Fire also criticized that Hoyt theory has not sufficiently considered the role of social and cultural characteristics in land use explanation. It is obvious that richer residents can choose to settle anywhere and may not follow the normal pattern, that is either concentric or sector pattern. Now, therefore, if we compare these two models, what we find is that in one, Burger's model is based on just one city, and that is why maybe its universal acceptance is less. But when we see Hoyt's work, he took number of cities in consideration. But here too, universal acceptance again is limited because his work was based on American cities. Now we come to the third and the last major model of urban morphology called the multiple nuclei theory, which was given by Harrison Ullman in 1945. They brought together their work on central place theory and classification of cities respectively to represent a metropolitan area that was not defined by distances from the central business district, but was based on the pattern of land use of the surrounding areas of the CBD or the central place district. Central business districts. During the time of the inception of the present day taking place in cities, residential, business, industrial or other elements to accommodate the growth of multiple nuclear models suggested by them as shown in the figure 5. Harrison Ullman, unlike Burgess and Hoyt, stressed upon the development of special purpose districts instead of social differentiation of residential areas. These districts were nodes of economic activity that needed specialized facilities and benefited from agglomeration economies of different activities centered there. The rise of such special districts or nuclei was due to numbers of factors which affect the human activities expansion within a city. These are, as I explained, some activities require specialized facilities like CBD, which can function at the point where maximum accessibility is possible. There are also numbers of activities which is present in cohesion. The densely packed inner districts of large cities are clustered with clothing industry. Due to cohesion, they get profit. Some activities are detrimental in nature to one another and generally seek separate locations. For example, heavy industry does not prefer to be near to high-class residential areas, while some are unable to pay the rents of most desirable locations like low-income residential areas or bulk storage facilities have to seek nuclei in remote regions. The factors which are discussed above, along with social, cultural and economic criteria, provide a unique landscape with separate nodes or separate centers or separate activities. Moreover, the theory reveals two significant observations based on historical and site elements of morphology. In one hand, the theory produces a model involving complexities of urban structure which may not be easily and immediately discernible because of historical stratification of land uses during the process of urban growth. Although there is only one CBD present in the most cities, they have a series of sub-centers around CBD. The peripheral areas are less specialized than CBD, but enough to cope up the needs of smaller sections of the city. Another one is an observation which is more significant is about the probability of the elements of the concentric and sector models present in its depth. There is nothing new which is involved in conceptuality in multiple nuclear model, and it should not be given the status of a theory. Therefore, multiple nuclear theory should be looked upon as an approach. Now, why do I say this? Because what the critics are saying is that nothing new was provided by Harrison Ullman, but if you actually look at the diagram, you will see the difference. Now, if we relate these three theories together, now Burgess speaks of only one CBD and he says that city outgrowths from that CBD, and we have CBD, then you have zone in transition, then we have workers residential zone, we have commuter zone, like we have 5 zones, right? Now when we talk of Hoyt's theory, we have sectors, and here these sectors have developed or rather grown along the road or rail networks. So these are accesses. But here too, what is the addition is that he comes up with light manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, which are not properly within the city, but maybe at the remote regions. Now, when we talk of multiple nuclear theory of Harrison Ullman, they did give an addition to these two theories or models. Now, what is the addition? What are they saying? They are simply saying that every city has one major CBD. Right? Now, but apart from that major CBD, they have certain other sub-centers. Now, if we speak of Delhi as an example, Connaught Place is the major CBD or the central business district. But apart from Connaught Place, a city which is size of Delhi cannot sustain only with Connaught Place as its CBD. we have, we have Nehru Place as one sub-center. We have similar sub-centers in maybe Punjabi Bagh, in Western Delhi, Northern Delhi, Southern Delhi. So in these parts which are quite far off and which are near the periphery of the city, they have their own CBDs, and people are not actually traveling daily basis to the main CBD of the center. So to look upon as this theory only as an approach, from my point of view, would be wrong, because, and even to say that it is just a generalization of about the urban form is also wrong. Now, because when we even talk of today's city, none of these three theories or models have universal acceptance, because as an urban geographer, I would like to say, I would like to submit that none of these cities are same or identical. So to just have a theory of urban morphology or an internal structure of a city is not the solution, but we have to start from somewhere. As I said in the introduction, why we need to study these theories is simply because they provide the philosophy behind the study of urban morphology. Now, if we superimpose these 5 zones on the land use of Chicago in 1920s, which was the base of Burgess's theory, we find identical concentric zones, as I have shown in figure 2. In zone 1, there was a loop. Now, this loop is nothing but the CBD or the central business district. Now, as we come to zone 2, we see that the diagram shows the location of Chinatown, Ghetto, Little Sicily slums and underworld rumors. That means this is a zone in transition. Now, here if you see the names themselves say the type of settlements these are, or the type of people who are staying in this zone. Now, see, ghetto is another word for slum. That means downtrodden people are staying in that. The other is specified, Little Sicily slums. Similarly, underworld rumors, that means somebody who is not part of the society. That means, that clearly means that this is a zone of vice. Now, this also consisted of second, now if we come to the third zone, we see we had second immigrant residential area, we have a Deutschland, which is a part of ghetto and also two flat area. Now, as I have mentioned in the when I was describing the zones of the concentric zone, we see that the zone 3 is residential area. So, again here Chicago's land use also shows that this zone, the zone beyond zone of transition, is a zone of residence. That means people who have who have just uplifted themselves from that zone of transition, who just want to have a better life, have actually migrated from zone 2 to zone 3. Another interesting feature what we see in the Chicago's land use is a common black belt region which is found in zone 2 and 3. Now, on the periphery of zone 3 there is bright light area. Now, bright light area is again something which is not acceptable in the society, and if you see the figure again, the bright light area is on 2 parts. So, that means actually concentric zones cannot be drawn. On the periphery of zone 3 there existed bright light area. Now, if you see the location of this bright light area, this is at 2 parts. Okay, it is on the upper part also and the lower part. That means if we actually try to make concentric zones and bright light area, because it is not an area which is readily accepted by the society, it should come in zone in transition, but here it is existing in zone 3. The actual zonation was not also possible at that time, but only to provide a generalized picture, Burgess has made these concentric zones, or rather provided this theory of concentric. Now, zone 4 was dominated by restricted residential districts, apartment houses and residential hotels. Now, what do I mean by restricted residential district? Very common in large cities of India. You will always see that all these high posh colonies of cities like Delhi, Mumbai, they are gated communities. That means people are every time, like throughout 24 hours, people are not allowed to enter those residential districts. The entry is somewhat guarded. Like even if a person who is working, a labor, maybe a maid or a driver is working, they have specific hours of entering. They cannot enter at any time. And similarly, People who are entering are also restricted. That is why it's like something which is bound, which is bound by certain norms. Similarly, we find in all apartment houses, even in residential hotels, the entrance is guided by certain principles. Now, the zone 5 is the commuter zone, which had single family dwellings and bungalows. Now, this is the commuter zone, is basically of the people who are extremely rich and they do the traveling to the CBD on the daily basis. So, if we see that that was happening in 1920s in Chicago, is even happening in today in Indian cities. For example, again I will cite an example from Delhi because I am a resident of Delhi. You see, people are staying in big bungalows or big residential colonies in Noida or in Faridabad or even in Gurgaon, and they are commuting daily via their private transport or via metro for their work. So, these people do not want to stay near their workplace. So, because they actually are rich and they belong to the high class, they can afford the luxury of transportation. So, somewhere what was happening in Chicago in 1920s is somewhat happening even today in India, but not at a universal level, or we cannot say that we can actually replicate the model of Chicago, but some features do exist even today in the developing countries, especially in its megalopolis cities like Delhi and Mumbai.